Welcome to this session on the liquidation regulations for corporate persons. Now my suggestion is you please go through the voluntary liquidation regulations once, the video, and then come to this regulation because there's going to be a lot of similarity, comparisons and things like that, and I will proceed with this video with the understanding that you have read the voluntary liquidation provisions. This regulation applies to the liquidation process under Chapter 3 of Part 2. Definition of a stakeholder means a stakeholder who is entitled to the distribution of proceeds under 53. Eligibility for appointment as a liquidator, more or less the same as the corporate insolvency resolution process part. Independent director criteria, not related to the corporate debtor, not an employee or partner of an audit firm, legal firm, 3 years. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. His partner or director of the IPE, if he is involved with any other stakeholder, then this person cannot be the liquidator. Liquidator's fee, who fixes the fee? Two types of fee fixation is there. One, by the committee of creditors themselves. Two, by the process here, by the board. Committee of creditors where? Under 33(1)(a) or 33(2). That is where a resolution plan has not been submitted to the adjudicating authority because of which an entity is going into liquidation. Then the COC is aware, so the COC will fix. The second circumstance is where the COC before the end of the moratorium period or the extended period knows we are going to liquidate. So in these two circumstances, the fee is fixed by the COC. Where the resolution plan has been rejected or where there is a contravention of the resolution plan, the other circumstances which trigger liquidation, the fee is as prescribed by the board in the slab as specified. Reporting, we go to the next segment. What are the reports to be presented here? There, in voluntary liquidation, it was 4 reports. Here it is 6 reports. Preliminary report, progress report, asset memorandum, sale report, final report, and minutes of consultation with stakeholders. For minutes of consultation with stakeholders, there is a particular prescribed format which is called Form A in Schedule 2. Please remember, under this regulation, there are 3 schedules. In voluntary liquidation, there were only 2 schedules. How long shall the liquidator preserve his records? He shall preserve the copy of all the records prescribed above for 8 years after the dissolution of the corporate debtor. He shall maintain it in physical as well as electronic form. Are stakeholders entitled to these reports and copies? Yes. He shall give it in physical or electronic form. What all does he have to ensure before the stakeholder is given this? The stakeholder has made the application in writing. I want this particular report. 2. This is the cost of making that report available to me. Here is the cost. 3. An undertaking that the stakeholder will maintain confidentiality and he will not use it to make an undue gain for himself or an undue loss for somebody else. What are the registers and books of accounts that need to be maintained? It is the cash book, bank book, ledger, fixed assets, investment securities, inventories, decree, suit, tenant, unclaimed dividend, everything, fee register, suspense register, document register, all the registers that were prescribed under voluntary liquidation also. What happens when the register is not up to date? The liquidator has to endeavor to bring them up to speed, bring them up to date at a convenient speed. What is the format for maintenance of these registers? Schedule 3 specifies the formats. Liquidator shall keep receipts for all payments and expenses, which means he has to keep vouchers. Appointment of professionals. Can a liquidator appoint professionals? Yes. To help him in the discharge of his duties and obligations and functions? Yes, he can appoint. Who cannot be appointed? A person who is the liquidator's relative or a relative of the corporate debtor or has served as an auditor of the corporate debtor for 5 years preceding the liquidation commencement date. Can the person who is proposed to be appointed have a pecuniary relationship? We spoke about relative and auditor. No. He shall not have any pecuniary or personal relationship, and if he has got something, he has to bring it to the knowledge of the liquidator. Consultation with stakeholders. Can liquidator consult with the stakeholders? Yes, he can. Is there any prescribed format in which he has to maintain the consultation? Yes. It is Form A of Schedule 2. Do people have to give cooperation to the liquidator, or does the liquidator operate by himself? No. People have to provide cooperation to the liquidator. Who are the people we are talking about? We are talking about officers, employees, partners, directors of the corporate person, IRP, RP, the previous liquidator, a person who's in possession of the properties of the corporate debtor. All these people have to extend support and cooperation. What happens if they don't provide support and cooperation? There, the liquidator can make an application to the adjudicating authority. Okay. Please star here possession of properties of the corporate debtor. That kind of people also have to cooperate with him. Disclaimer of onerous property. Of course, disclaimer can be done. What is onerous property? We've seen everywhere. Where something is burdened and the cost of recovering that property itself will be more than the cost of the property. Where it just doesn't make commercial sense to try and enforce that onerous property. Land of any tenure burdened with onerous covenants, stocks or shares in companies, any other property which is not saleable or readily saleable, unprofitable contracts. This is the description of onerous property as specified. Now, he has to make an application to the adjudicating authority within 6 months from the liquidation commencement date, or such extended period as may be allowed by the adjudicating authority to disclaim the property. When is such application required? Not required. It is not required when a person who has an interest in the onerous property asks the liquidator, do you want to disclaim? And he does not respond to such an application or a request within 7 days, within 1 month from the date of receipt of the enquiry, then he cannot make an application for disclaimer. Does he have to serve any notice when he is making an application for disclaimer? Yes. He has to give 7 days notice before making an application for disclaimer. What happens to a person who is impacted by the disclaimer? He is deemed to be a creditor of the corporate debtor for the amount of compensation or damages. Till now what we went through was Regulation 10. We go to Regulation 11, extortionate credit transactions. I am not going to touch this again. 12, public announcement by the liquidator. In what form shall he make the public announcement? Schedule 2, Form B. What will the public announcement say? Call the stakeholders to give the claims. Provide the last date and the format in which the claims have to be submitted. What is the last date for submission of a claim? 30 days from the date of public notice. Liquidator, how soon will he make the public notice? Within 5 days. Please remember, for corporate insolvency resolution process, it is 3 days. For voluntary liquidation and liquidation, it is 5 days. Within 30 days, the claims have to be received. And again, within 30 days, the claims have to be checked. Where shall the announcement be made? Identical to the CIRP process. English, vernacular, website of the corporate debtor, website designated by the board. What is the first report? Then we go to Regulation 13. What is the first report that has to be prepared? It's a preliminary report. Within when does it have to be prepared? 75 days here. 45 days in voluntary liquidation. What shall the preliminary report contain? Capital structure, assets and liabilities as at the liquidation commencement date, any investigation that he proposes to carry out in relation to formation, promotion or management, and proposed plan of action for carrying out the liquidation, including the proposed cost and the timeline. Now, what happens? Now he has to provide a statement of assets and liabilities. What happens if he doesn't have the actual numbers? He is entitled to make estimates based on reliable records. Then there is something called as early liquidation. When does an early liquidation get early dissolution get triggered? Under regulation 14. If any time after the preparation of preliminary report only, you can make a request for early liquidation, early dissolution. When the assets are insufficient to cover the liquidation process, affairs don't need any further investigation, then he can apply to the adjudicating authority for early dissolution. There's hardly any asset, just a little amount sitting in the bank or some small realization, and there's a huge list of liabilities. What is the joy in maintaining this? I will apply for an early dissolution. So two things: insufficient, no investigation. The next report. Now elsewhere I will reiterate again, the compulsory liquidation process is 2 years. So he has to furnish a progress report. How often must the progress report be furnished? It is quarterly. When does the progress report have to be furnished? 15 days from the end of the quarter. First progress report within 15 days of the end of the quarter where he is appointed. Subsequent progress reports 15 days from the end of each quarter. What happens if he resigns? When he ceases to act as a liquidator, he shall file a progress report for the quarter up to the date of which he is ceasing to act within 15 days of such cessation. So suppose I stopped being there in February 2018. Then by the end of February, 15 days, I have to file that. It's not the quarterly timeline. So he has to file it for the Jan-February quarter. Here please remember, it's not a calendar quarter. The quarter ticking starts from the quarter in which he is appointed. Okay. What all should the progress report contain? Appointment, tenure and cessation of appointment of professionals, progress of liquidation, fees and remuneration, material litigation, avoidance of transactions, and change in estimated liquidation cost. Appointment and tenure of professionals, progress of liquidation, fee remuneration, material litigation, avoidance of transactions, and changes in the estimated liquidation cost. And the progress report shall enclose an account maintained showing the receipts and payments during the quarter and the cumulative amount of receipts and payments. Now, a progress report. Who has access to the progress report? Nobody has access to the progress report. Who does the liquidator furnish the progress report to? Have you thought about it? He furnishes it to the adjudicating authority. Who does the liquidator support the preliminary report to? Hand over the whom does he submit it to? Again, to the adjudicating authority. Progress report shall not be accessible to any person, because somebody can actually rig the liquidation process, right? There is an illustration, progress report of the 4th quarter of the financial year. So he's obviously they're talking about financial year, and I stand corrected there. For the 4th quarter of the financial year. So where I'm talking about a progress report for Q4, it shall be accompanied by an auditor's statement. Now, where a person has ceased to act as a liquidator, he shall also submit the audited accounts for the date up to which he ceased. With this, we'll cut this video here, and in the next video, we'll go to chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 7 of these regulations.